Hello. My name is Sierra Blythe. At 34, I hosted the first party I'd ever thrown for myself. Housewarming, backyard, my own food, my own rules. And 5 minutes in, my parents barged through the side gate, screaming about a debt I didn't make, throwing champagne across my table, and smashing my birthday cake like it was a statement.
Why?
Because I said no. No, I won't give my brother another dime. No, I won't apologize for succeeding without them. They didn't just humiliate me in front of 50 guests. They tried to rewrite my story, turn me from daughter to villain. But what if I told you I didn't fight back the way they expected? Would you stay to hear how I burned their narrative without raising my voice?
Because peace.
Mine at least. Started with paperwork. And silence louder than any scream. I'd spent the past 6 months building this moment. Paint swatches, loan papers, late-night emails with my realtor. Every decision was a promise to myself. I was finally done living as someone's safety net. The backyard shimmered with soft amber lights strung across the fence, a playlist of jazz humming low through the speakers. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of barbecue and honeysuckle. My coworkers mingled near the taco stand. Neighbors laughed around the fire pit, and for once, I wasn't the one cleaning up someone else's disaster. I was just Sierra Blythe, 34, homeowner, independent, and breathing a kind of air I hadn't known existed. People kept hugging me, saying things like, "You did it," or "This place looks like a dream." I smiled until my cheeks ached, though part of me wondered if I should have told them how far I'd crawled to get here. How many nights I'd stayed awake calculating payments and wondering whether I'd ever outrun the family chaos that followed me everywhere. I lifted my glass of sparkling water, catching my reflection in the window, confident, almost peaceful. This house isn't just a place, I whispered under my breath. It's a full sentence. I'm done paying for other people's mistakes. The thought made me exhale a small laugh. Freedom tasted a lot like lime and mint. My phone buzzed on the patio table.
4 missed calls, Mom.
I turned it face down. Not tonight. Not on the one night that finally belonged to me. Harlan came over with his usual calm grin, that look of quiet pride he got whenever he saw me doing well. "Everyone's having a great time," he said, brushing a crumb from my shoulder. "You should be proud, Sierra." "I am," I said softly. Maybe for the first time. We clinked glasses. The light flickered across his face, and for a fleeting second, everything felt settled, like life had finally tilted in my favor. But it didn't last long. It started with a sound I recognized before I saw them, the scrape of the side gate, the creak it always made because I hadn't fixed the hinge yet. A low murmur rolled across the yard, laughter dying mid-sentence. Then my father's voice, sharp as ever. "So, this is where the money went." The crowd parted. My parents stood under the hanging lights like ghosts stepping into daylight. My mother, Velma, clutched a half-empty bottle of champagne. My father, Edric, red-faced and rigid, looked as though he'd marched straight out of an argument. Their presence sucked the warmth out of the night. I froze, my smile falling away. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" Mom laughed too loudly, her eyes glassy. "We didn't want to miss your big celebration. Thought we'd see what success looks like for the daughter who forgets her family." Whispers rippled through the guests. I could feel every eye turned toward me. Harlan shifted closer, ready to step in, but I lifted a hand, signaling him to wait. Dad's voice thundered over the music. "You're really going to celebrate with all this and leave your brother buried in debt?" I blinked. "This isn't the place." $200,000, he barked. "That's how much your brother owes. Rehab, studio equipment, lawyers. And you, standing here like you're above all of us."
Gasps.
The music died. Somewhere behind me, someone dropped a plate. Velma stepped forward, holding her champagne like a weapon. "Doria needs help, Sierra. You know what addiction does to a family. We raised you better than this." Her words hit like darts. I felt my pulse rising, but I didn't move. "You weren't invited," I said quietly. "We're your parents," she shot back. We don't need an invitation to our own daughter's house. The air turned heavy, stifling. I caught sight of my coworker and, whispering to her husband. Another guest stared, phone in hand, uncertain whether to film or run. "Mom, you need to stop," I said through gritted teeth. But she didn't. She slammed the bottle down on the dessert table, the cork popping loose, champagne spilling across the cloth. "You think you're too good to help family now that you've made it?" "Velma," my father snapped. "She needs to hear it. She owes us." He turned to the crowd as though pleading his case to strangers. "We gave her everything. Without us, she wouldn't have this house, that job, any of it." I felt the room, the yard, the laughter, the safety, shrink into silence. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice came steady. "Please leave. You're embarrassing yourselves." The sentence hung there. For a moment, I thought they might back down. Instead, Velma's face twisted into something bitter. She raised the bottle and smashed it against the edge of a table. Glass scattered, liquids soaking through the tablecloth. A few guests jumped back. "You owe your family, Sierra," she screamed. "Without us, you'd still be nothing." Harlan took a step forward, but I caught his arm. "Don't," I whispered. Dad's face contorted with rage. "You're ungrateful," he growled. "We sacrificed everything for you. You'd let your brother rot just so you can play the victim?" A coworker near the grill muttered, "Is this for real?" Another neighbor whispered, "That's her family?" I wanted to disappear, but I stood my ground. I said, "Please leave." My voice cracked softer this time. No one moved. Someone's phone camera light blinked to life. The sound of Velma's sobbing filled the space, loud and theatrical. Harlan moved beside me again, quiet but present. His eyes asked what I wanted him to do. I gave him the smallest nod. A signal. He turned toward the patio entrance, already pulling out his phone. The neighbors were still frozen. My father glared at me like I'd betrayed him personally. "You're not family anymore if you walk away from this, Sierra. Remember that." I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, but because none would have mattered. Every apology I'd given before had only bought me another round of guilt. This time, silence was all I had left to give. Velma's voice softened suddenly, dripping with something almost tender. "You know he can't survive without you. You're the smart one, the stable one. We need you." I met her eyes. "You don't need me. You need someone to blame." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Even the air seemed to pause. For a moment, I thought she might hit me. Instead, she stared, long enough for everyone to feel the weight of it, then turned away, muttering something about shame and betrayal. I exhaled, but before I could move, my father leaned in close enough that only I could hear him. "You'll regret this, Sierra. Blood doesn't forget." Then he stepped back, smiling coldly at the crowd, as if this humiliation were a family performance. Harlan returned from the gate, whispering, "They're on their way." I nodded. My throat ached, but I forced myself to keep standing. Around me, the whispers had turned to awkward chatter as people tried to act like the world hadn't just tilted. The fairy lights flickered above us, steady but dimmer now, like even they were embarrassed. Velma's eyes darted around, realizing the security team had entered through the front path. "What is this?" she demanded. I didn't answer. I only looked at her. Really looked, seeing not my mother, but a woman who'd built her entire sense of worth on control. I had finally taken it away. She called my name again, louder this time. "Sierra." "We're not done talking." I turned my back to her and faced the dessert table, where the champagne stain was spreading into the linen. I wiped it once with a napkin, then folded the cloth neatly, pretending she wasn't there. The act felt strange, tiny, defiant, like choosing peace while standing in the middle of a hurricane. Behind me, I heard the footsteps of the guards and my mother's sharp protest. "You can't make us leave." Then the distinct shift of motion, the sound of people being led away. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The night air trembled with the sound of them being escorted out, my father shouting something about shame, my mother weeping that I'd lost my soul. I picked up my glass again. The mint had wilted. The ice melted. Still, I lifted it slightly toward the sky and whispered, "Here's to freedom even when it hurts." When I finally looked back, the gate had closed, the crowd had scattered to quiet corners, and only the low hum of the playlist remained. That's when I gave the signal, and they didn't see what was coming next. The crowd hadn't even started breathing again when everything went sideways. I stood frozen near the patio lights, my glass still in hand, the music long gone silent. The night felt too bright, every string of bulbs above me flickering against the dark sky. My parents stood near the dessert table, two storms that had found each other. For a second, I thought maybe they would just leave, that my quiet command had landed somewhere in the chaos. But then Velma moved. She crossed the yard like someone on a mission. Her heels sank slightly into the grass, but she didn't care. In one sharp motion, she grabbed the edge of the cake stand, lifted the whole two-tiered thing, and hurled it down. Frosting splattered across the grass, pink and white like someone had crushed a bouquet of roses. The gasps from the guests came in one long wave. "This house doesn't mean anything," she shouted, voice trembling. "Not if it wasn't built with family." Her words cracked through the air, brittle as glass. Before I could answer, my father stepped to the gift table. He reached for the large framed photo of my house, the one my friend Elise had printed as a gift, wrapped in gold ribbon. He tore it open, glanced at the picture, then slammed it to the ground. The frame hit the concrete, glass exploding into sharp reflections under the lights. Someone whispered, "What is happening?" No one moved. People stood there, half holding their drinks, half in disbelief. I felt something shift inside me, not panic, not fear. It was something colder, steadier. I'd lived through their chaos before, but this time, it wasn't going to drag me down with it. "Harlan," I said quietly without turning. He was beside me in seconds. "Yeah. Get security."
Now.
He didn't ask why. He knew better than to try to reason with the unreasonable. Velma was still talking, pacing near the ruined dessert table. "You think this place makes you better than us? You think money makes you pure? We made you, Sierra." Her voice cracked. I saw something flash across her face, shame, maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it came. My father just stared at the guests, his jaw set tight. "You forgot where you came from, girl." That word, girl, hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't 10 anymore, waiting for permission to speak. I was a grown woman standing in a home I'd built brick by brick, mortgage by mortgage. "Stop," I said, my tone even. "Both of you. Please." Mom turned her glare on me. "You're throwing your own mother out? In front of strangers?" "Ask you to leave," I said. Twice. Harlan reappeared with 2 security staff, polite, calm men in black polos with earpieces. They didn't rush. They didn't look threatening. They simply walked to the edge of the patio and waited for my cue. Velma looked at them like she'd been betrayed by the universe. "You called the police?" "They're not police," I said. "They're private security. Please go." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Maybe," I replied, "but not as much as I'd regret staying silent." The guards stepped forward gently, keeping their hands visible. One of them spoke in that professional voice people use when the situation could still go either way. "Ma'am, sir, we'll escort you out now." My father clenched his fists, his pride prickling under the public eye. "You touch me and I'll..." The guard cut him off softly. "We don't want any trouble. Let's take a walk, all right?" Velma struggled, her voice rising higher. "This is your family. Do you hear me? You're humiliating us." I met her eyes, steady. "You've done that yourself." A silence followed, so thick you could hear the champagne dripping from the table onto the grass. They moved them toward the side gate. My mother tried to twist away once, nearly slipping on the frosting. My father muttered curses under his breath, words meant to wound but too tired to matter anymore. As they reached the gate, Velma turned back, shouting, "You think this makes you free? You'll never be free of us." I didn't answer. Freedom doesn't come with permission. When the latch clicked and they were gone, The backyard felt suddenly enormous.
No one said anything.
A child's voice broke the quiet. Why is that lady yelling? The parents nearby shushed him quickly, embarrassed. Harlan exhaled beside me. It's over. I shook my head. No, it's begun. He studied me. Do you want everyone to leave? I looked around. My coworkers stood awkwardly by the buffet, pretending to check their phones. Neighbors avoided my eyes. I saw pity, confusion, maybe even judgment. But pity was still better than control. Let the music play again, I said softly. He signaled the DJ. The soft jazz returned, uneasy at first, but slowly weaving through the silence. People shifted, whispered. A few guests offered tight smiles. One woman approached, hesitated, then said, I'm so sorry, Sierra. Families can be complicated. That's one word for it, I said. She nodded and retreated. I crouched near the shattered frame. The glass shimmered like small stars scattered across the patio. My reflection blinked back at me in 100 pieces. I picked up one shard carefully, catching the edge of my face in it. This isn't the first thing they've broken, I murmured. Harlan bent down next to me, using a napkin to help collect the pieces. Let me get this. I shook my head.
No.
I need to finish it. We gathered the fragments into a plastic bowl, setting it on the table where the cake used to be. The sight was absurd and sad, and somehow perfect. Guests began slipping away with quiet goodbyes. I didn't blame them. Who wants to stay in a house that just became a battlefield? When the last of them were gone, I stood alone under the strings of light. The air smelled faintly of sugar and champagne. The music kept playing, but softer now, as if it too were embarrassed by the night. I thought of my mother's face, how quickly love could turn to accusation. I thought of my father's voice, always louder when he felt small. This isn't the first time they've broken something that belonged to me, I said under my breath. But it'll be the last. Harlan walked back from the driveway.
They're gone, he said.
I nodded. My throat tightened, not from sadness but release.
Good.
He hesitated. You handled that better than most would have. Handling it is all I've ever done, I replied. But I'm done cleaning up their messes. We stood there for a while, the sound of night insects filling the spaces where laughter used to be. He reached for my hand, warm and steady, but I didn't squeeze back. Not yet. I needed a minute to let the quiet feel like peace again. Inside, I turned off the porch lights one by one, leaving only the smallest glow by the kitchen window. The house looked different now. Not new, just real. The walls knew the truth, and so did I. As I closed the door, I caught one last glimpse of the yard. Cake on the grass, broken glass near the table, chairs slightly tilted from panic. A scene that could have belonged to anyone anywhere. But it was mine. Even broken glass casts reflections, and I was about to see pieces I hadn't dared to face in years. After the security lights dimmed and the last car disappeared down the street, the house fell quiet in that strange, heavy way only big houses can. I moved slowly through the living room, gathering half-empty glasses and paper napkins, careful not to step on any shards from the broken frame. The smell of frosting and spilled champagne lingered, sweet and sour at the same time. I could still see where the cake had landed, pink smears in the grass, a reminder of how fast joy could rot into something else. I carried a stack of plates to the kitchen and set them in the sink. My hands moved on their own, the way they do when you've done something 1,000 times before, cleaning up after other people's chaos. That realization made me pause. I wasn't cleaning for them anymore. This was my house, my mess, my silence. The clock on the stove blinked 11:03. The air conditioning hummed softly, steady, indifferent. I reached down and picked up a champagne cork near the counter, one that must have rolled away when my mother had slammed the bottle earlier. I turned it over in my palm, feeling the dented surface where it had hit the floor. This wasn't about the house, I murmured to myself. It was about proof. Proof that I'd become someone without owing them a thing. Proof that I could stand on my own without their guilt, their manipulation, their constant reminders of what I owed. But proof doesn't change the past. I placed the cork beside the cracked photo frame on the counter. The image inside, what was left of it, showed the house from the front, sunlit, perfect. A piece of glass split the image right down the middle, dividing the picture the same way my family had always been divided. Them on one side, me on the other. As I stared at it, a memory I'd buried started to pull itself up from where I'd shoved it years ago. It was 3 years earlier. Late winter. My startup, small, scrappy, barely hanging on, was 2 weeks from collapsing. My last developer had called to say he couldn't wait for his paycheck any longer. I'd been skipping meals to make the rent for the office. I remember sitting in my car outside that old downtown building, staring at my phone, wondering who I could call. I scrolled past names of investors, colleagues, friends who'd already given me all they could. Then I stopped at Mom. I hadn't asked her for anything since college, but that night desperation blurred pride. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Sierra, honey, it's late. What's wrong? My voice cracked before the sentence was even out. Mom, I took a shaky breath. I need a little help. Just $2,000. My company's short this month. If I can make payroll, I can keep going. She was quiet for a beat. Then her voice came back, warm but detached, like a teacher rehearsing sympathy. Oh, sweetheart, I wish you'd called earlier. Dorian's audition is next week. He needs a new guitar. I blinked, thinking she must have misunderstood. A guitar? Not just any guitar, she said. It's a Gibson, the one he's dreamed of. The old one's falling apart. He can't go to the audition without it. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, the phone still to my ear. Mom, my company's going under. I'm not asking for much, just a bridge to keep one person on payroll. I can pay you back in a month. She sighed softly, like she was the one being burdened. You're strong, Sierra. You always find a way. Your brother, though he needs encouragement. You understand, don't you? I didn't answer. She didn't notice. Her tone turned lighter, cheerful almost. Maybe you can sell some of your things. You've always been good with money. I heard myself say thank you before hanging up, even though she hadn't helped me. The absurd politeness of that moment stayed with me for years. I sat in the car for a long time afterward, watching my reflection blur in the window as the streetlight flickered. I didn't cry. I just felt something collapse quietly inside me. 3 days later, I saw her post on Facebook. A photo of Dorian holding a brand new guitar, his grin wide and careless. The caption read, "Support the dreamers in your life." The words hit me harder than the picture. Support the dreamers. As if practicality didn't count as a dream. As if working until your hands ached didn't mean you were chasing something too. Back in my kitchen, I realized I'd been gripping the edge of the counter so tightly my knuckles ached. The memory left an aftertaste, like the metallic tang of regret you can't wash out. They didn't just let me fall, I whispered. They watched me drown and handed him the life raft. The sentence came out quiet, almost factual, but the weight of it filled the room. I took a deep breath and turned toward my laptop on the table. It had been sitting there since before the party, still open to a spreadsheet from work. I clicked through old folders until I found one labeled Year 1, Startup Records. Numbers filled the screen, small and steady, like proof that the version of me back then had survived despite everything. I scrolled to the months that hurt the most: February, March. The dip in revenue was sharp. Then the slow climb. I remembered every step of that climb. The clients I cold called, the nights I coded until dawn, the deals I closed without anyone's help.
No guitars, no loans, no rescues.
Just grit. A notification blinked in the corner of the screen, an unread email from earlier that evening. My chest tightened before I saw the sender. Dorian Kess. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I hovered over it but didn't open it.
Not tonight.
Harlan came in quietly, his footsteps soft against the tile. "You're still up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "You cleaned the whole place." "It's what I do when something's broken." He nodded, studying me. "You did the right thing out there, you know. Some people never stop waiting for an apology that won't come." I met his eyes. I'm not waiting for an apology. I just want it to stop hurting. He stepped closer, reached for my hand but didn't take it, just hovered there, letting me choose. I let his hand rest over mine, just for a moment. Do you want me to stay? He asked. I shook my head. I'll be fine. He lingered, then kissed the side of my head, locked the door behind me. When he was gone, I turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the small lamp by the counter. The shadows made the room feel smaller, safer somehow. I glanced again at the cracked photo frame, the split line running between the image of my home and the sky above it. It looked like a scar, visible but healed. I opened my laptop again, this time to a blank document. I typed a few words, testing how they felt in my mouth as I whispered them. Freedom has a cost. Mine was family. I stared at it for a while, then saved the file and closed the screen. The clock read 12:18 a.m. The night outside was silent now, even the crickets gone quiet. I went to the window, pulled the curtain back. The streetlights cast long silver streaks across the lawn. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably still awake, convincing themselves they were the victims. Maybe they were. Maybe we all were. But as I looked out at the calm street, I realized something. I wasn't scared of their anger anymore. What frightened me was how normal it had become to clean up after it. I turned back to the kitchen one last time before heading upstairs. The cork still sat on the counter beside the broken frame. I placed them both into a small drawer, closed it gently, and whispered to the empty room. That's enough. What I didn't know was, someone else was already rewriting my story again online. I didn't sleep well, but I must have passed out sometime after 2 a.m. The weight of everything, the shouting, the smashed cake, the broken frame, had finally pushed me into a kind of restless fog. But the moment I opened my eyes that morning, the fog lifted and something darker replaced it. My phone was buzzing before I even got out of bed. At first, I thought it was another round of texts from my dad, or maybe some half-hearted apology from Mom, though even thinking that felt naive. I didn't check it right away. I took a few seconds to sit up, stretch, and brace myself for whatever came next. By the time I shuffled into the kitchen, barefoot and still in the t-shirt I'd passed out in, Harlan was already standing by the coffee pot. He didn't say good morning. He didn't kiss my cheek or ask how I slept. He just held his phone out toward me and said, "You need to see this." I didn't want to, but I took the phone anyway. On the screen was a paused video, Dorian's face, backlit by daylight filtering through his car windows. His eyes were red, hair messy. He was talking directly to the camera, holding it at an angle that made him look smaller, more vulnerable than he actually was. The video was already at 83,000 views. Harlan hit play. "I didn't want to do this," Dorian's voice started, hoarse, the tone of someone who's rehearsed sadness in the mirror. "But I'm out of options. My sister, the same sister who I helped get her company off the ground, has decided I'm not worth saving." I blinked hard. The first wave of nausea hit fast. I clutched the counter to keep myself upright. "I've been struggling," he continued. "With addiction, yes. But also with trying to stay afloat in a world that rewards the cold and leaves people like me behind. My own family, the one person who could have helped, threw me out like trash. While she's in a mansion sipping cocktails with her tech friends, I'm trying to survive." Then came the tears. Perfectly timed, slow enough to pool without falling too quickly. I'm not saying I was a perfect brother. I'm just saying I didn't think blood would turn its back on me. The screen went dark, and my reflection stared back at me from the black glass. "I didn't even know he could fake cry like that," Harlan said, voice low. "It's gotten nearly 10,000 shares since this morning." I handed the phone back, without speaking. Instead, I walked over to the dining table and opened my own phone. 10 missed texts. 3 voicemails. Over a dozen tags on Facebook and TikTok. Every notification like a pebble thrown against my window, demanding I come outside and face the storm. I clicked into one of the posts. The comment section was already a battlefield. "Family is family. Doesn't matter the cost. She left her brother in the gutter. What kind of person does that? Bet she wouldn't treat a business partner like that." I scrolled further, and felt something in me start to close up, like a steel door slamming shut. Then I saw a name I recognized, Madison. She and I had gone to college together. Shared dorm meals, late-night cramming sessions. We weren't best friends, but I'd always thought we had mutual respect. Her comment read, "Wow. She always acted like she was better than everyone. This explains a lot." I sat down hard. My coffee was cold now, untouched. I didn't even notice when Harlan sat across from me. "It's not just him," I whispered. "It's everyone who's ever wanted to believe the worst about me." "They don't know you," he said. "They don't want to," I corrected. He reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "You want me to draft something? A statement? Even a short post, just setting the record straight?" I pulled my hand away, not out of anger, but exhaustion. "No," I said. "If I explain, they'll twist that too. You've seen how this works. The louder you scream, the more they say you're defensive." Harlan leaned back. "Then what do you want to do?" I opened my phone again,
Tapped the TikTok icon.
deleted it. Then I did the same with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. One by one, I erased the platforms that had become feeding grounds for other people's versions of my life. Silence followed. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that comes after an explosion, when you're left with debris and ringing in your ears. I stood and walked to the sink, staring out the window at the backyard. The grass was still stained. A corner of the photo frame was sticking out of the trash can. The patio chairs were slightly askew, like they hadn't recovered from the chaos. "You're not alone," Harlan said behind me. But it didn't feel that way. Not after reading those comments. Not after realizing how easy it was for strangers, and even acquaintances, to pile on. All Dorian had to do was look sad on camera. I'd spent years being the one who stayed up late managing payroll, negotiating contracts, surviving panic attacks over whether we'd make rent at the office. And it had taken him 5 minutes and a TikTok to make me look like the villain. I didn't cry. Not then. But I felt something inside me change, harden just a little. After Harlan left for his office, I stayed at the kitchen table for a long time, just watching the light move across the floor. The sun was out, mocking me with its brightness. A notification from my email lit up my laptop screen. Subject line: Local talent feud goes viral. I clicked it. It was from a small Austin music blog. The article was titled, "Sister of Successful Tech CEO Under Fire for Abandoning Troubled Artist Brother." I didn't bother reading the rest. Instead, I closed the browser and reopened my laptop settings.
Click.
Log out. Delete profile. I wasn't running. I was protecting what little peace I had left. As the afternoon wore on, I washed the dishes, folded the extra chairs, took the garbage out. I moved like a machine, methodical, mechanical. There was nothing else to say.
No one I wanted to say it to.
Sometimes silence is a shield. Sometimes it's a prison. That night, I climbed into bed early. I didn't turn on the TV or read a book. I just lay there, the quiet pressing in from all sides. But sometimes, silence leaves just enough space for old ghosts to walk back in. By the time the sun sank behind the trees, the silence in the house had grown thick again. The blinds were half closed, keeping the world out, but I could still see streaks of gold on the floor. It was that hour of the evening when everything looks softer than it really is, a kind of trick light that hides the cracks. I sat out back on the porch, a glass of water beside me, the yard still scarred from the night of the party. The grass hadn't recovered from the cake stains, and the smell of frosting still lingered faintly when the wind shifted. I tried not to think about the video, the comments, the judgment I couldn't control. I just needed quiet. But quiet never stayed long. A breeze moved through the trees, and for a reason I couldn't explain, it pulled me back to another night. Years ago. A birthday that didn't matter to anyone but me. I was 10. I remember because that year, I'd made my own birthday card. The kitchen had smelled like vanilla that morning because I'd tried to bake cupcakes with the mix I found in the pantry. The frosting was uneven, the candles mismatched. I'd set them on the counter, proud in a small, secret way. But no one came home in time. Mom and Dad had left hours earlier for Dorian's first real performance. His middle school band had been invited to play at a church event. It was all they talked about for weeks. "He's a natural," Dad had said, patting him on the shoulder. "He just needs our support." When I'd asked if we could do my birthday after, Mom had smiled that tired smile she always gave me when she wanted me to understand something she'd already decided. "You're mature, Sierra. He needs encouragement right now. You understand, don't you?" I nodded, because saying no only made things worse. By the time they came home that night, the cupcakes were hard, the frosting crusted. They brought back a recording of the performance and wanted to watch it right away. I sat next to them on the couch, pretending to be interested. Dorian missed half his notes. They clapped like he'd played at Carnegie Hall. That was the first time I realized birthdays don't belong to people like me. They belong to whoever the family needs to feel special. The memory faded as I rubbed my arms against the chill of the evening. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A car door slammed. And then, right on cue, my phone vibrated against the porch railing. The number was hidden. No name, no caller ID. I shouldn't have answered, but some part of me knew who it was. "Hello, Sierra." The voice was calm, almost kind. "My mother's." I froze, fingers tightening around the phone. "How did you get this number?" "You changed it. We're your parents. You think we can't find our own daughter?" I closed my eyes. "What do you want?" A sigh came through the line. "I want to understand why you're doing this. Why you're trying to destroy your brother." My throat tightened. Destroy him? He made a public video accusing me of abandoning him. "You think I did that?" "He's hurting," she said softly. "You should have called. You used to care." I stood and walked back inside. The kitchen lights glared against the countertops. "Caring doesn't mean I keep paying for his mistakes, Mom. It doesn't mean you get to walk into my life whenever you need money or sympathy." "You think this is strength, Sierra? Cutting us off? You think independence makes you better?" "I think it keeps me sane." There was a pause, then a shift in her tone, colder now, sharper. "If you don't help your brother, you are no longer my daughter." For a moment, I didn't breathe. The words landed flat, not like a threat, but like a fact she'd been saving for years. I stared at the wall, trying to feel something. Anger, grief, anything. But all I felt was a deep, tired emptiness. "You already made that choice a long time ago," I said finally. "You just never said it out loud." She raised her voice. "Don't twist this.
We raised you better than that."
"Family sticks together. You'll regret turning your back on us." The line crackled. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was the kind of tremor that comes from exhaustion, the point where you've carried too much for too long, and your body finally rebels. Harlan must have heard me from the living room. He appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened from work, eyes cautious. "You okay?" "She found me," I said quietly. He frowned. "Your mom?" I nodded. "Private number." He hesitated, reading my face before stepping closer. "What did she say?" I tried to smile, but it came out hollow. "That I'm not her daughter anymore."
He winced.
"She really said that?" Word for word. For a while, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, crickets had started their usual chorus. He leaned against the counter, studying me. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked. I looked at the laptop sitting on the table, the same one that had held all my startup records, all my history. "I'm going to make it official." He tilted his head. "Official how?" "Legal," I said. "If they want to play this game like family doesn't exist, then fine. But the financial ties, they end tonight." He gave a small nod, the kind that said he wouldn't stop me even if he wanted to. I sat down, opened the laptop, and began typing. My hands moved faster than I expected, driven by something between fury and relief. "To Law Office of Crane and Lowell. Subject: Termination of Family Financial Association." I typed each line carefully, making sure every word cut clean. "Effective immediately, I, Sierra Blythe, hereby withdraw from any and all financial guarantees, co-signed agreements, or contractual obligations made under the Kess family name. I am no longer liable for any current or future debts associated with Velma Kess, Edric Kess, or Dorian Kess. Harlan stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. "You're sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm done being the safety net." I added the last line. "This is not an act of anger. It is an act of closure." Then I hit send. The screen went blank for a second, as if even the computer needed a breath. I leaned back, letting out the air I didn't realize I'd been holding. Harlan put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing." "I don't know if there's a right thing," I said softly, "but it's done." He gave me a sad smile. "You've been the strong one your whole life. Maybe it's time you let someone else clean up." I met his eyes. "That's the problem. There's no one left who will." The clock on the microwave glowed 10:45. The night outside felt endless. Somewhere, maybe in their house, my mother was probably pacing, rehearsing her next line of guilt. My father would be silent, pretending neutrality. Dorian might already be crafting another video. But here, in this kitchen, with the faint hum of electronics and Harlan's quiet presence beside me, something inside me shifted. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the first step toward it. I closed the laptop. "It's strange," I said. "It only took a few words to end 30 years of holding everything together." "Sometimes that's all it takes," he said. "Paper to cut the cord." I exhaled slowly. The past may be on paper now, but the lies, they're just getting started. The days that followed felt deceptively calm. After sending that final legal notice, I thought maybe the storm had passed. I went back to work, answered emails, even met a few clients. I let the silence from my family feel like closure instead of a warning. I should have known better. It started on a Thursday morning. I had taken the day off to handle some errands, mundane things like groceries, dry cleaning, and a visit to the bank to refinance my car loan. Simple tasks, no emotions attached. I remember humming softly in the car, watching the spring light flicker across the dashboard. The branch lobby smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. A young banker named Josh greeted me with a smile that was a little too chipper for the hour. "Good morning, Ms. Blythe. Should be quick, just need to verify a few things." He typed into his computer while I filled out a form, my mind already wandering to lunch. But his cheerful tapping slowed, then stopped. His face shifted from polite to confused. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. It's probably nothing, but did you recently open another credit line?" My heart skipped.
No.
"Why?" He frowned at the screen. "There's an active $30,000 line of credit in your name, opened 3 years ago. It's got a small outstanding balance, but it's listed as current." I froze. "That's impossible." He turned the screen slightly toward me. My name was there. My address, an older one from when I rented that small apartment near downtown. The signature on the form at the bottom looked like mine. The loops, the slant, it was identical. "I've never seen this account," I said. He cleared his throat, uneasy. "Sometimes families co-sign things together without realizing, maybe." I cut him off gently, but firmly.
No.
"I don't co-sign. Ever." He nodded quickly. "Okay. Well, you'll want to file a dispute. I'll print the form." While he printed, my pulse hammered. My name, my handwriting, my debt, but not my doing. I signed the fraud declaration with shaking hands, thanked him, and left before he could finish his polite reassurances. Outside, the air felt thinner. I called Harlan before I even reached the car. They opened a credit line in my name. 30,000. He didn't say anything at first. Then, carefully, "You're sure?" They forged my signature. I got into the driver's seat, trying to steady my breathing. "I recognize it. It's from an old lease, one Dad handled for me when I moved. He had a copy of my ID back then." Harlan's voice tightened. "You need to go home. We'll figure this out there." I drove in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers hurt. It wasn't the money that broke me. It was the familiarity of the betrayal. The quiet way they did it, assuming I'd never notice. When I got home, Harlan was already there. He'd pulled down the old file boxes I kept in the hall closet, tax returns, property records, the kinds of things you never expect to matter until they suddenly do. We sifted through papers at the kitchen table. Dust rose in small clouds under the warm afternoon light. It felt like archaeology, digging through layers of a family's history only to find proof of the rot underneath. After an hour, Harlan pulled out a faded envelope marked with my grandfather's handwriting. "This looks old," he said. I took it. The paper was brittle around the edges, sealed with a small embossed stamp, my grandfather's attorney's office. I remembered the name vaguely from when I was a teenager. Inside was a letter, dated the year before I went to college. "Dear Sierra, as discussed, your education fund has been finalized. The amount of $50,000 is to remain in trust until your graduation. It is intended solely for your future endeavors. Your parents have been notified of the arrangement." My chest tightened. I'd never seen this letter before. Tucked behind it was a smaller note, lined notebook paper, my father's handwriting. "Use this for Dorian's music program. Sierra won't mind. She's practical." My hands went cold. I read it again, slower this time, making sure I wasn't imagining it. He'd written it like a reminder, not a confession. Like spending my inheritance on my brother's hobby was a reasonable household errand. "They planned for me to succeed," I said quietly. Then they handed my tools to someone else. Harlan's jaw tightened.
Sierra.
I shook my head. They didn't just take money. They took every chance I had to not need them. The room felt too small. I walked to the window, staring out at the street where kids were riding bikes, laughing like the world had never failed them. My reflection in the glass looked older somehow. Harlan stood behind me, voice low. "They didn't just betray your trust. They stole your identity. Twice." The truth of it hit like gravity. Once on paper, once in spirit. I turned back to him. "I'm not letting them do it again." He nodded slowly. "Then let's make it official." I opened my laptop again, the same one that had sent out the notice last week. But this time, it wasn't about distance. It was about defense. I typed out a report to the credit bureau, attaching scanned copies of the forged documents, my ID, and a statement describing the fraud. Each word steadied me, turning pain into structure. Next, I drafted an email to the family attorney. My subject line was simple: notice of intent to pursue damages. The body read, "Dear Mr. Lowell, this is to inform you that fraudulent activity has been discovered in my financial history, directly linked to members of my immediate family. In addition, funds from a trust set by my late grandfather appear to have been misappropriated without consent. I will not engage in private negotiation. I will pursue legal remedy." When I signed my name, it didn't tremble. Harlan leaned over my shoulder. "You're sure? About the facts? Or about going through with it?" I asked. "Both." "Yes." I hit send. The email whooshed off into the ether, landing somewhere between justice and consequence. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Then Harlan exhaled. "You know this won't go quietly, right? They'll fight back." "I'm counting on it," I said. "I've spent my life surviving their quiet." I closed the laptop and rubbed my temples. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was ancestral, the kind that settles in your bones when you've been the one to keep peace that no one deserves. "Do you think your father even realized what he was doing?" Harlan asked. I thought about it. Maybe he convinced himself it was fair. Maybe he told himself I'd understand. That's the story they always tell. Sierra will understand. Sierra won't mind. "And your mother?" "She probably signed the forms and called it support." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Support for what?" "For the dreamer," I said bitterly. "Always the dreamer." The clock on the wall ticked past 9. The sky outside had turned a deep shade of blue, quiet and endless. I thought about my grandfather, a man I barely knew but who'd seen enough of his family to set money aside privately for me. He'd known something was broken long before I did. And they stole even that. Harlan walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to keep carrying it." "I know," I said. That's why I'm finally setting it down. I didn't feel victory. Not yet. Just clarity. The kind that cuts through denial and leaves nothing but truth. As I stared at the sent email on the screen, one thought circled in my mind. If this was the cost of being the family scapegoat, then maybe I'd finally paid in full. But while I armed myself with facts, Dorian came armed with something else, his version of the truth. By Saturday morning, the temperature had climbed into the high 80s, but my skin prickled with something colder. I hadn't slept well the night before, tossing between flashes of old documents and the hollow echo of my mother's voice disowning me. I tried to distract myself with small tasks, laundry, watering the plants, organizing the junk drawer. But even silence has its limits. Just before noon, Harlan walked in holding his phone like it was a grenade someone had tossed into our kitchen. "It's live," he said. I didn't need to ask what he meant. He set the phone on the table, already playing. Dorian's face filled the screen, calm, clean-shaven, even dressed in a collared shirt. He sat in a dimly lit room that I assumed was his rental, using that serious voice he always saved for when he was performing sincerity. "I've avoided saying anything personal for a while," he began, eyes cast down. "But people keep asking why my sister refuses to speak to me. Why she's cutting me out of her life and making me look like some monster." I scoffed. "You did that all by yourself." Harlan didn't say a word. Dorian looked back at the camera, holding it like a confessional. "The truth is I helped her build her company. In the beginning, when she didn't have clients or clout, she used me. My image. My music. I was her creative partner." He paused dramatically. "She told investors we were building something together. Said I was her inspiration. But now that she's made it, she's pretending I never existed." My jaw clenched. He wasn't lying, not entirely. He was twisting the facts just enough to look clean. He tapped a file on screen. A pitch deck appeared, one of my earliest from when I was barely keeping the startup afloat. Our names were listed together, in small font at the bottom. At the time, I had added Dorian's name more out of appeasement than necessity. He liked the idea of being involved, but never showed up to meetings. What he didn't mention in the video was how he missed 3 client calls, borrowed office equipment to record a demo, and funneled half the petty cash to his so-called producer. When I confronted him, he said, "You owe me. I gave you credibility." I'd removed him from the team silently and moved forward. But now here he was, rewriting history with the perfect balance of regret and wounded charm. The comments on the video were already climbing, over 20,000 views and counting. She built her empire off his dream and left him behind. She's cold. That's not success, it's greed. Classic corporate type. Family means nothing when there's a dollar on the line. I turned away from the phone. I can't listen to any more. Harlan muted it. It's spreading fast. I nodded, rubbing my temples. He's not just making me look selfish. He's recasting himself as the victim. Again. Harlan sat across from me, eyes searching mine. "You knew he'd come back swinging." "Yeah," I whispered. But I didn't expect him to be this calculated. I stood, pacing the room. There was so much I could say, so many receipts I could post, emails, contracts, canceled checks. But I knew how that story ended. The louder I shouted, the more they'd claim I was unstable, emotional, bitter. I walked over to the window, needing air. That's when my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something told me to open it. It read, "I saw what's happening. I need to tell you something. I'm sorry I disappeared. It wasn't your fault." My breath caught. I stared at the screen, hands shaking. Another message came seconds later. "Your mom told me to leave. She said you were too focused, too ambitious. That I'd ruin your life." The contact name updated automatically, Ethan. Ethan. 10 years. 10 years since he ghosted me right before graduation. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. I'd cried for weeks, convinced it was something I did. Some flaw he finally saw too clearly. And now, with a few short sentences, the truth cracked open like a wound that never quite healed. I sat down slowly. My chest felt tight, but not from heartbreak. From understanding. They controlled everything, I said aloud. Harlan looked up.
What?
My mother, I whispered. She told him to leave me, said I was too focused and needed to be redirected. He blinked, stunned. She sabotaged your relationship? I handed him the phone. Read it. His eyes moved across the screen. His lips pressed into a thin line. That's abuse, Sierra. That's control, plain and simple. I stood up again, not knowing where to go, but needing to move. It wasn't just about money, Harlan, or guilt. They didn't want me to have a life they couldn't own, a future outside of them.
He followed me to the hallway.
You were their investment. As long as you played your part, they reaped the benefits. I turned to face him, voice firmer than it had been in days. Well, I'm done performing. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a glass of iced tea, the fan humming overhead. I pulled out my laptop but didn't open it right away. I needed to write something that wasn't for court. I started by jotting down a title, When They Make You the Villain. Then I wrote the first paragraph of a memoir I hadn't realized I'd been carrying in my bones. They didn't break me with fists or fire. They broke me with stories, told in rooms I wasn't in, to people I hadn't met. They recast me as the threat, the betrayer, the ice queen. But I was always the one who stayed up late balancing checkbooks and apologies. The words came fast after that. I didn't know where the story would go, but for once, it would be mine. Not theirs. Not Dorian's. Not Velma's.
Mine.
This time, I wouldn't just walk away. I'd leave something behind, and shut the door behind me. 2 mornings had passed since Dorian's video hit its second million views, and the flood of messages hadn't slowed down. My name had become the kind of hashtag people used to argue about family values, sibling loyalty, and the meaning of forgiveness. Except no one was talking to me. They were talking about me. But all the noise had done something I didn't expect. It made me silent. Not the paralyzed kind of silence, but the kind that brings precision. I was done reacting, done explaining, done hoping people who never wanted to see me would suddenly open their eyes. So, by Tuesday morning, I was at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, my breath even, my coffee untouched. I started typing. To Velma, Edric, and Dorian Kess, final notice. This will serve as my last communication to you as a family unit. I have paid in guilt, in silence, in expectation. I have paid with nights spent fixing your fires, with weekends sacrificed to your dramas, and with a reputation you've now made it your mission to destroy. I no longer owe you anything. Not explanation. Not space. Not forgiveness. This is the last transaction. I reread every line. I let it sit on the screen. Then I printed it out, on thick, white cardstock, the kind used for formal letters of recommendation. This, too, was a kind of recommendation, that I leave you all to the lives you chose without me. I slid the letter into a manila envelope. Inside, I also included the official documentation from the family attorney confirming the revocation of my co-signer status, the pending fraud investigation paperwork, and the notice of intent to pursue legal action if further defamation occurred. The front of the envelope read, To Velma, Edric, and Dorian Kess, final notice. It felt
Clean.
not vindictive, not theatrical.
Just. Clean.
Harlan came into the room as I sealed the envelope. He didn't ask what I was doing. He had that look he sometimes wore during investor meetings, watchful, quiet, calculated. The man knew when to step back and let a moment be what it needed to be. I'm dropping it with a courier this afternoon, I said, slipping the envelope into my bag. Tracked, notarized, and signed for. He nodded. Do you want me to go with you? I paused, then shook my head.
No.
I need to walk this one alone. Later that day, we drove into downtown for a meeting with a defamation attorney, someone Harlan had worked with before. I had my doubts about going the legal route with anything tied to Dorian. He was too slippery, too prone to performance, but after what I'd seen online, I had no choice. The law office was sleek and cold, the kind of place where consequences had to dress up in suits to be taken seriously. The attorney, A woman named Laura sat across from me in a gray blazer and matching eyes. She pulled up the security footage Harlan had sent her, loaded onto a tablet. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to play the clip. "Go ahead," I said. We watched together. Velma screaming. The cake hitting the grass. Edric yelling so loud his voice cracked. Me, standing there, arms at my side, not raising my voice, not even stepping forward. Just holding. Laura clicked pause and looked at me. They can say whatever they want online, but this is gold. "It's not about money," I said. "I know. It's about narrative. And this." She tapped the tablet. "This is yours." She leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly. "If they push anything legally, especially after that video campaign, you have a rock-solid countersuit." I nodded, slowly. I didn't want to sue, but I wanted the right to. By late afternoon, I stood at the Courier's downtown office, waiting in line behind a man sending documents to Nevada and a woman shipping something overnight to a college kid in Vermont. When it was my turn, I stepped forward and placed the envelope on the counter. "Signature required," I said. "Trackable. No drop-offs, no neighbor holds." The courier glanced at the address. "Kess. Same last name?" "Used to mean something," I answered. "Not anymore." The package disappeared behind the counter, and with it, something loosened in my chest. I walked outside to where Harlan was parked, engine idling, music low. As I slid into the passenger seat, he asked, "Done?" "Done." He offered me a quiet smile, the kind that says you don't need to explain. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the moment stretch. The weight I'd been dragging for years wasn't gone, but it had shifted. I wasn't holding it for them anymore. Back home, I poured a glass of wine and went out onto the porch. The sky was dipped in lavender and amber. The birds were quiet, as if even they were waiting to see what came next. I thought about the years I'd spent being the designated fixer, the calm one, the capable one, the forgiver. I'd learned to patch things up so well that people had stopped noticing what they were breaking. But now the tools were put away. Harlan joined me with 2 glasses. We sat in silence until the sun slipped under the edge of the world. "I didn't burn the bridge," I said aloud. He looked over, curious. "I filed the paperwork," I finished. Quietly. Permanently. He nodded. "It's a better ending than they deserved." "Maybe," I said. "But it's the one I needed." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't grief. It wasn't regret. But I didn't expect the silence to feel so loud. But something else was waiting in the quiet. It had been almost a month since I sent the envelope marked final notice. 1 envelope, 3 names, and a lifetime of unfinished business sealed inside. I thought that would be the loudest silence I'd ever hear, watching the courier drive away and feeling nothing but the hum of my own breath. But silence, I've learned, doesn't just hover. It expands. It seeps into spaces you didn't know were still raw. Harlan and I had moved 2 weeks ago. A smaller house in Cedar Park, far enough from Austin to avoid bumping into people who might recognize me from viral accusations, but still close enough to make a target run without giving up civilization. The house wasn't flashy. 2 bedrooms, a modest porch, and a kitchen that didn't need renovations. It didn't come with ghosts. That was the whole point. We spent the first week unpacking boxes at a lazy pace. I took my time deciding where to hang the art, how to fold the dish towels, whether the coffee mugs should live to the left or right of the sink. I played music most afternoons, jazz, folk, anything without lyrics. I let the space become mine, inch by inch. The neighbors waved. One even dropped off banana bread. There was no mention of TikTok, no allusions to drama. Just a hello, and nice weather today. On one especially quiet Sunday, Harlan handed me a padded envelope while we were organizing a box labeled Office, Old Papers. It was unsealed, tucked between years of bank statements and outdated W-2s. "I think this one's for you," he said, handing it over without ceremony. I opened it on the porch while he made coffee. Inside was a letter. Real paper. Blue ink. The kind of writing people don't do anymore. At the top, in my mother's unmistakable cursive, It read, "Dear Sierra, I know you're going to be angry reading this. Maybe you'll even throw it away. But I wanted you to have something in case we lose each other for good. You're the last hope of this family. You always were. You're the one who carries the weight, the one who shows up, the one who makes sure we don't fall apart completely. Sometimes I resent you for it, but mostly I admire you, because I could never be that strong. Please don't lose yourself in trying to save the rest of us."
Love. Mom. I didn't cry.
Maybe because the letter was written too long ago to still feel real, or maybe because my tears had been rationed carefully over the past few years. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the back of my journal. Not to reread, just to keep. That evening, after dinner, I plugged in an old external hard drive that had survived 3 laptops and countless relocations. I was searching for archived startup files for tax season. What I found instead was a folder titled Scholarship Banquet 2008. I clicked. There I was, 17, in an ill-fitting navy dress, my hair too stiff with product, standing awkwardly behind a podium. The camera was shaky, but I could hear my father's voice loud and clear as he introduced me. "This one," he said proudly. "She's going to change the world. And if she doesn't, she'll fix it anyway." The room had clapped. I remember that part. I remember the heat in my cheeks. I remember thinking, maybe he really sees me. I watched the video twice. Then, without much fanfare, I dragged the folder into the trash and emptied it. Not out of anger. Not to erase him. Just to let go. Forgiveness, I've realized, isn't always something you give. Sometimes, it's what you stop waiting for. A few days later, I got an email alert from one of the industry blogs I still followed, mostly for the headlines. The subject line read, "Emerging artists' deal falls through amid legal questions." I opened it.
Dorian.
Apparently, the record label he'd been boasting about had backed out after inconsistencies surfaced about his pitch. Someone had submitted an anonymous packet, documents, screenshots, a timeline. I wasn't the one who sent it. I stared at the article for a while. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel relief. I just felt still. He'd lost something he thought was owed to him. I'd lost a family that never really held me. Somewhere in that mess, we had both become something we didn't recognize. That night, I uploaded the first chapter of the memoir I'd been writing. The title read, "When They Break You, Don't Shatter." I didn't promote it.
No hashtags.
No call to action. Just a quiet post on a small forum for women writers who understood complicated families and the kinds of love that burn at both ends. 10 minutes later, a message popped up. From Loretta K. "I needed this story. My sister did the same to me. Thank you for putting it into words." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and leaned into Harlan's shoulder, the hum of the evening settling around us like a blanket.
No fireworks.
No victory lap. Just peace. The kind that doesn't demand you forgive the unforgivable, only that you stop bleeding for it. I may have been their fixer, but now I choose peace. And peace never asks you to prove you've earned it. Some stories aren't about reconciliation. They're about release. This was never just about a party, a debt, or even a broken family. It was about choosing self-respect over silence. About realizing that family doesn't mean endless sacrifice, especially when the cost is your peace. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they kept taking pieces of you? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe,